Hello and welcome back to the final episode of our Whaling to Watching series on Oceans Live. I am your host, Kate Thompson, with NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, coming to you live from the tip of Cape Cod in beautiful Provincetown, Massachusetts, for the 38th voyage of the Charles W. Morgan. The Morgan is the last surviving wooden whale ship in the world, and we've been here at the Pilgrim Monument and Provincetown Museum all weekend, bringing you exclusive footage and interviews from her historic journey to the Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary. We've had an amazing time covering the voyage and spending time with this truly incredible ship. I want to acknowledge the fine folks at the Mystic Seaport for all their hard work to restore the Morgan and their commitment to share this inspirational voyage with the world. Find out more about the 38th voyage at www.mysticseaport.org. Hello again to everyone who's watching our broadcast at our remote viewing sites, including the Mariners Museum in Newport News, Virginia, Mystic Seaport in Mystic, Connecticut, the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary in Alpena, Michigan, and the Mokupapapa Discovery Center in Hilo, Hawaii. Thank you all for tuning in, and we hope you've enjoyed our broadcast over the past 3 days. But we're not finished yet. We've got lots of great stuff lined up for you in the episode, both here in the studio and out on the deck of the historic whale ship Charles W. Morgan. I'm so happy to welcome now, via Skype, someone who we had originally scheduled to talk with on our first show this week, Philip Hoare, author of the New York Times bestseller, The Whale, In Search of the Giants of the Sea. Philip, it's so good that we were able to finally catch up and speak with you.
It's great to speak to you too, Kate.
Thank you so much for joining us. So where are you now?
I'm in Cork Harbour in Ireland.
Oh my goodness, but weren't you just here recently in Provincetown?
I was last month.
Nice. So how come you always come out here? Do you do it regularly?
Yeah, I did. In fact, I was there throughout June volunteering on the dolphin whale watch boats, working with the naturalists there, with Dennis Minsky and the various other naturalists who work on the whale watch boats.
Oh, great. Well, I've heard you have talked about all your childhood passion for whales and your experiences whale watching in Provincetown, as you just mentioned. How did these experiences inspire you to write this book?
Yeah, I guess, the thing is, we're all fascinated with whales as children, aren't we? I guess it's one of those animals that grabs you, rather like dinosaurs and all that. I mean, but I suppose for me it was actually coming to Provincetown and seeing those animals, in the wild, seeing them actually leaping out of the water in Cape Cod Bay. It was just a stunning sight, and they just seemed to embody the kind of the missing link between us and the ocean. They embody that connection, which in a way we've lost many ways.
Okay, so in your book you talk a lot about the different types of those whales that you were just mentioning. Which whales were most commonly hunted off of Cape Cod, and what about some of the other parts of the world?
Oh, sure. Well, obviously the humpback whales were being hunted off Cape Cod, but really it was the North Atlantic right whale, which was nearly driven to extinction by the hunting in the 19th and 20th century. But of course, around the world, the most commonly hunted whale, which would have been hunted from the Morgan, is of course the sperm whale, which is a very deep diving pelagic animal, which is used to the open ocean. It's not a shore loving whale like the humpback or the right whale. Hence the fact that the Morgan had to go way around the world to what they called the line, which was the equator, which is where most of the sperm whale hunting was done during the 19th century.
So why were sperm whales and right whales the whales to hunt, and what made them different from each other?
Well, the main thing with the sperm whale was that the great sort of extended nose of the sperm whale contained this oil, spermaceti oil, which was actually even now is prized as a lubricant. NASA space program have used it as a lubricant in their space program. But back in the days of the 19th century, it was used for making pure candles that burnt without smut, and used for lubricating everything from machines to watches. And so it was a highly prized commodity, and you only got it from sperm whales. The right whales, of course, were the oil was less find from a right whale, but what right whales gave you were these great long plaits, these slats of bait in their mouths, which was used for everything we use plastic for now, for vanilla blinds and all sorts of things.
So we just actually showed a really good shot of the spermaceti that we took over at the Nantucket Whaling Museum, because I think a sperm whale went up on shore there in 1998, and they were telling us how they caught the spermaceti out of the head of the whale, and they had to end up using a huge rubber raft because they just weren't expecting the amount of spermaceti that came out of the whale. It was just amazing and what happened. What are some of the other things that they actually took out of the whale and used for our needs?
Well, of course, for decorative purposes, they made scrimshaw from the whale's teeth. Sperm whale's teeth were commonly, these sailors on a 5-year voyage on the Morgan, not a lot of that time was spent actually hunting whales. There was a lot of downtime. So during that time, they would carve the teeth with intricate patterns of scrimshaw, and they would either barter with other things from islands they landed on with these teeth, or carve them for their loved ones back at home. But of course, the most precious natural substance known to human beings came from the sperm whale, which is ambergris, which is a kind of protein. It's a cholesterol that comes from the whale's stomach, which happens when whales eat squid. The hard beaks of a squid get caught in the lower intestines of a sperm whale, and ambergris forms around this. It's a strange, very potent smelling material, and it's still used in perfumery nowadays because it fixes scent. It's used by perfume houses in Paris and everywhere. So, in fact, that is the most valuable substance, natural substance created, known to human beings. It still changes hands, even quite small lumps, for tens of thousands of dollars.
It's crazy. I wonder how they even came up with the fact that they could maybe use that for perfume.
It's a weird notion, isn't it? It's like all these things, how did anyone come up with here? But it just speaks to the strangeness of these animals which roam the deep ocean, and the fact that we still know so little about sperm whales. We know they dive for up to a mile in depth and stay down for 2 hours, but no one's ever seen a sperm whale down at that depth. We know they feed on giant squid and generally smaller squid, but no one's ever seen them doing it. They remain one of the most enigmatic animals in the ocean.
Well, in your book, you actually mentioned that the word cetacean comes from the Greek katos, meaning sea monster. Why were whales, which we now usually think of as gentle giants, why were they seen as such terrifying beasts?
Well, it's a complete... You must put yourself in the mind of people who weren't used to long sea voyages. They weren't taking these, they didn't have that access to the ocean. They didn't have that scientific knowledge. They didn't know that sperm whales are actually one of possibly the most intelligent animals around. Sperm whales have huge brains, but they are very placid animals. I've swum with sperm whales in the Azores. They're very, almost timid. They get freaked out by dolphins, for instance. But, if you imagine this sort of 65, maybe up to an 80-foot long animal with these huge teeth, people just presumed that they were ferocious, like sea dragons. Everyone's interaction with these animals seemed to be... They were freighted with the myths of the past. So... very recently, with sort of discoveries of Jacques Cousteau diving in the water, the first underwater footage of the sperm whale. We knew what the Earth looked like from outer space before we knew what the sperm whale looked like underwater. And then suddenly we realized these are intensely beautiful, socially adept creatures which are entirely placid. Although, of course, the story of Moby Dick is based on the true life story of a whale ship, the Essex, which was stove and sunk by a sperm whale. But generally, sperm whales are pretty placid kind of animals. So I think it's that disconnect between the mythic past the storied past of Jonah and of the reality of the animals that we know now to be wonderful social creatures.
Right. I completely have to agree. Some of those, we just had a show on art, and a lot of because there wasn't obviously cameras, and you had also mentioned the fact that we couldn't even videotape them underwater until a couple decades ago to really understand the whales themselves and their behaviors. So the only people who had this interaction with them were the whalers themselves. So I heard that you've actually had a first-hand experience with these creatures off the shore of off the coast of the Azores. Did you actually dive with sperm whales at one time?
I did. You can't scuba dive with whales generally. They get freaked out by the bubbles. They don't like the bubbles. So you generally snorkel with them. And I've dove with the Azores many times now, but the first occasion was very memorable because we came upon a pod of about 12 to 14 sperm whales off the coast of Pico, one of the central islands in the Azorean archipelago. And I was swimming towards this pod of the sperm whales, and the largest of the whales, who I now realise to be the matriarch of the group, started swimming directly at me. And I was very apprehensive, to say the least, because I knew that sperm whales, of all whales, the only animal which could actually swallow a human being. In the days of aid, that did happen, possibly today, but all this is going through my mind as suddenly this animal was within maybe 20 feet of me, and it starts echolocating me through my body. It's sonar, it's echolocation moving through my skeletal structure, and I could feel the three-dimensional image of me being beat back to the whale's head. Very extraordinary experience. I won't forget it.
Well, Philip, that sounds like an amazing experience, and it's such a great transition to some of the awesome experts that we actually have out on the Charles W. Morgan that actually do acoustic technology. And we also have a wonderful gentleman here in the studio. He can talk to us as well about acoustic technologies. And since you are the preeminent researcher on some of this acoustic stuff, Chris, thanks so much for joining us in studio. And Philip, we'll come back to you in a little bit. But Chris, can you tell us a little bit about your program and how it's listening to underwater noise?
Well, thanks very much for having me this afternoon. This is fantastic. And as a Cape Codder myself, this is quite a wonderful experience. As we know, sound in the ocean is your livelihood. You can't survive without listening to and producing sound, and whales have extraordinary capabilities. Philip was just mentioning the echolocation of a sperm whale. Well, the great whales, such as the blue whale, which is the largest animal ever to live on this planet, right whales, they all make sounds, and they all communicate with sounds. And so what I do is I listen to the ocean. And it's quite a treat to be paid to listen to whales in the ocean. And you know what's extraordinary is that even after all these years of doing this, every time you listen, you discover something new. Right off of Boston, right? 20 miles offshore from one of the centers of intellectual capacity, we are still hearing things that we don't know what they are, right? We have the whales, we have things that are probably whales, but it's just a totally rich experience underwater when you listen to this.
Well, Dr. Clark, you have done some amazing stuff at Cornell University in your bioacoustics lab with all the acoustics stuff that you've got going on. And we have Leila out on the ship, Dr. Leila Hatch. We're having problems and issues getting out to the ship because they're just coming in and they're out of range for us around up here. But can you tell us a little bit about your connection with Leila? She works here with the Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary, and the types of research that you've done together. Right.
Well, Leila is a dear friend and a colleague, and so we've had the luxury of being good friends and also collaborating with each other. And I worked very closely with Leila and her colleagues at the Stellwagen National Marine Sanctuary, Dave Wiley and others there, installing a network of buoys that automatically are listening for the sounds of right whales. We wanted to know if there were right whales around. And one of the easiest way to find out if there's a whale around is simply to listen. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So you could go on right now and you could go to www.listenforwhales.com, right? And we have 10 buoys that are right in the shipping lane, and they're connected to satellites, and they have a little brain on the buoy that's constantly listening to the ocean, and when it hears a right whale, it's making a diagnosis, and it's packaging all this information together. It sends it up to a buoy. It comes back down into the lab. It gets validated, and then it gets put out there for everybody to listen to. And it's quite extraordinary. You can think of this as a nervous system. Humans finally have a listening network right off of Boston, and here it is, right off of Cape Cod, right in a sanctuary. And it's an extraordinary gift that we are able to give back to the ocean and enable people to listen to it. You know?
Well, we just showed a couple of different photographs of the different listening systems that you have underneath the waves, but we do have Jean-Michel Coustea out on board the ship as well, and interesting enough, his father had mentioned about the world underwater being the silent world. Mm-hmm. Tell us how that's not the truth.
Well, you can understand that if you were diving and you had apparatus on that was making a lot of noise, you wouldn't be able to hear the ocean. But the ocean is alive with sound. There are no known deaf marine mammals, whales, dolphins, seals, sea lions, fishes. All the fishes that we know of all make sound and listen to the ocean. So, we put equipment in the bottom and listen to it, and sure enough, on a really, really, really quiet day, I can hear a blue whale singing off of Ireland. I listened to a blue whale singing off of Ireland while I was listening off of Norfolk, Virginia.
Wow. Philip, did you hear that? Are you still there? He just said that you can hear a blue whale from Ireland all the way here in the United States. That's
right.
Pretty amazing.
That's right.
Well, it's pretty amazing that you can hear me all the way from Ireland.
That's true, too.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's great. So Philip actually was saying how when he was diving with the sperm whales, he was hearing them speak to him. So that's actually, I wanted to ask you about some of these different types of calls. How can you tell them apart, and what the different whales are singing or saying to each other?
Well, the singers, sperm whales, of course, they produce this incredibly intense echolocation click that comes out of their that massive forehead that Philip was talking about, the spermaceti organ, which is actually an acoustic lens. And now you can listen at the same time. You'll hear the sperm whales clicking, but you'll also hear the low, long notes of a blue whale song, which is actually so low that you and I can't hear it. It's infrasonic. But the humpbacks were one of the great singers, right? The humpbacks are the prima donnas of the whale world, right? And they sing long, complex arias that go on for 15, 20, 25 minutes, and they repeat them over and over again. And whalers knew about that. They may not have known the species, but you can hear those songs through the hulls of a ship. So if you were standing on the ship, if you were up in the crow's nest and you had your ear against the mast, you would hear the songs, the voices of the whales coming through the ship.
Have they done any research on what they might be doing that for, or?
Well, that's what Leila and I do a lot of. We're trying to figure it out. A lot of it is, it's song, and these are males that are advertising themselves with very complex, long arias. And each of the species have different song types, so you can I could teach you or a group of 5th graders very quickly to recognize blue whale, fin whale, humpback whale, minke whale, sei whale, right whale, gray whale, the whole thing. They're all separable. But then you get this cornucopia of sounds that it's from a whale because it's coming from a long way away and you can follow it. But we don't know what it is. And there is a sharing of sounds that we don't know what they are about. And as I said, right now we are still in the infancy of listening to the ocean, just discovering what's going on and who's saying what and why they're saying it. But the thing that is so important that I think that the point I would like to make is that it's hard to survive in the ocean if you can't hear.
Right. Well, I hear that speaking of hearing, I hear that we are back on with Morgan and Leila and Dr. Ivar Babb from the University of Connecticut, and they're going to actually talk to us a little bit about the different types of waves that come through the ocean and sound and how it works and how they use it for educational purposes with students. Like you just mentioned, you could teach a 5th grader all the different types of whale calls that are going on out there. So Matt, hi Leila and Ivar and Matt, can you talk to us a little bit about the primer sound and what we're thinking about it?
Hi, Kate. Yeah, standing next to me on my right is Dr. Leila Hatch, and on my left is Ivar Babb, and they're going to give you a little bit of an illustrated demonstration about sound. Leila, why don't you show us a little bit about sound visualized through a rope?
Well, we decided, since we're out here surrounded by rope, to talk about wavelengths a little bit. People are very used to thinking about sound as either high tones or low tones on the piano. And we tried to think about a rope as a way to translate that into distance, because sound, we often measure sound. One way we measure sound is in wavelengths. People are used to picturing a wave as something that has a peak and a trough, goes up and down, and you can actually visualize that in a rope. So we thought we'd wiggle this rope to show you a longer wavelength. A longer wavelength corresponds to a lower tone sound. Like the
Wow, that was some sound. It kind of sounded a little bit like the whales and what they do under the water. We're just losing that connection. But we can go back to them right now, so let's try again. Leila.
Okay.
So Leila, why don't you go ahead and demonstrate those two different visualizations of wavelength?
Okay, let's try this, Ivar. So we're going to do a longer wavelength sound with a very big wave, a wave that only really gets one peak to trough in this one wiggle that we're doing with this pretty stiff rope. Not so easy. Now we're going to try to get some higher frequency wiggles, many more peaks to trough in the same distance. So that's wavelengths done by Morgan Rope.
Well, I think that was a pretty good visualization, absolutely. Now, Leila, why don't you tell us a little bit about your bioacoustic research that you're conducting? You've been studying right whales in the sanctuary over the past few years. And have you discovered anything that really surprised you about how often they're heard?
Well, I think you guys just got to talk to Dr. Chris Clark, who's one of our big collaborators in this work. We also work with folks down at the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, another part of NOAA. And what we've been really interested in finding is that when you listen underwater, you hear a whole lot more than you knew was there when you just looked. We're not so good at seeing things in the ocean. We have this propensity to see things when it's light, and therefore during the day, and we're a lot better at seeing them during the summer months when we can be out here in this gorgeous weather and on relatively calm seas. So we've learned a lot about the fact that there are right whales in our area in the wintertime, and that they use particularly the northern section of the sanctuary and even all the way up through Jeffrey's Ledge, north of the sanctuary, north of Cape Ann and Gloucester, pretty abundantly in our winter months before they become that higher density group of feeding right whales that we know so well in Cape Cod Bay in the spring.
Well, it is critical to know where those right whales are, since there's only about 450 of them left in the world. Is that right?
That's right. It's a very small, very heavily endangered population. The right whales have been heavily commercially whaled, as we've all been talking about historically, but they also face a lot of tough threats today. They are a surface-loving animal that hugs the Northeast Corridor, where we do a lot of stuff offshore, and a lot of that stuff overlaps really directly with where they live, and they get entangled in nets and unfortunately struck by ships. A lot of the things we work to protect them against by doing research in the sanctuary.
Well, in that same area you're talking about, I understand there's quite a lot of sound. Now, the Morgan has no propulsion engine, so she must be much quieter than most of the traffic that goes through this area. Is that sound something to be concerned of, and particularly with right whales?
Yeah, we're very concerned about the effects of underwater noise from things like vessels on right whales. Again, because they do hug this Northeast Corridor. It's a corridor that we use all different kinds of vessels, from large commercial vessels that come in and out of our big ports to ferry traffic and whale watching trips and ecotourist trips of various sorts, and passenger ferries. There's a lot of different vessel types out there doing a lot of different work. And the sound of the bubbles that cavitate or burst off their propellers make a low-frequency signature that overlaps pretty remarkably with the frequencies that are used by right whales to communicate with one another. Both male and female right whales use a lot of different kinds of sounds. One of the sounds they use the most prolifically in the waters of Massachusetts Bay and Cape Cod Bay is the upcall, which is an upsweep at lower frequencies, and it really, that frequency bandwidth they use is really heavily overlapped by shipping noise, and we've really seen a decrease in their ability to communicate with one another using that signal.
So we've been discussing the impact of noise on right whales. What about other whales and even fish?
All the baleen whales, that's all of the whales that don't have teeth. They have those big baleen plates. All of them use sound to communicate with one another and make signals. But the use of sound underwater is way more dramatic than the use of sound just to communicate. It really is about the many things that all marine life underwater uses sound to hear really important signals from the environment as well as from each other through communication. And we know this more and more about lobsters and crabs and really importantly, a lot of fish. And so we've been really looking increasingly at the sounds that are made by those critters to communicate, but also the various ways that they are using sound to orient themselves in the water, to detect predators so they don't get eaten, to find their prey so they have something to eat. So we're really worried about the effects of noise on all of that signaling too.
Well, thank you. That's very informative. I think many folks have a much better idea about sound. Now, standing here with me, Yuvar Bab, I understand that you're working with a special group of students to research whale acoustics and vocalizations. Students you might not initially associate with acoustic research. Should you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, Matt, as you know, we've been bringing teachers and students to Stellwagen Bank to use it as a natural laboratory beginning in 1988 with a program we call the Aquanaut program. And this is a program that schools could apply to be involved with. And in 1998, we got an inquiry from the American School for the Deaf in West Hartford. And they said, can we be involved with the program? Will you take deaf students on board? Interestingly enough, we had a gentleman, Dr. Peter Scheifele, working with us, who was a bioacoustician, and we said, this is going to be an interesting fit. Because using the technology, the hydrophones that were used to measure the sound underwater and the ability of computers to display those sounds, deaf students could see sound that they could not hear. They could begin to understand the properties of sound, as we were trying to demonstrate with regards to wavelengths and frequencies. They could see those things graphically that they couldn't hear. So it was a wonderful match, and then combining that with the importance of sound and coming out here to Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary and having the kids see the whales, and then see the sounds that they made, it was a marvelous marriage, and it really has worked well. We continue that to this day, and kids are now building their own hydrophones. And we've actually had the good fortune to have them go to Mystic Aquarium and use their hydrophones to listen to the vocalizations, of the whales that are there, the beluga whales there that are in captivity there. So it's been a great program, and it's engaged, this underrepresented population, in science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM, which is really, really important for us to advance with all of our students.
Well, Kate, I think we have a fantastic primer here on acoustics, particularly in the Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you so much. Well, Dr. Clark, thank you for all your hard work and Leila's hard work to better understand the sound that the waves or the whales encounter under the waves, and interactions with the ships and us and Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary being able to modify shipping lanes and other things based on some of your research. So thanks again, and appreciate everything that you do to help save the whales.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So we actually, one more question. Is Philip with us still?
I'm here.
Hi, Philip. Great. I wanna let you go and have dinner over in Ireland. So, Philip, thank you so much. I just wanted to ask you one last question, because your book really impacted me, and I know it's impacted so many people in better understanding the whales and what they're going through and what they did go through in our whaling heritage. But I wanted to ask you, with all this research and all this great stuff that's been going on acoustics and behavior understanding and other things and intelligence of these whales, what do you think the future is for them?
Oh, you know, I'm very encouraged, I think, in many ways. I was in Australia earlier this year, and they're getting 10% more humpback calves coming back on their migratory routes off the east coast of Australia. Here we've got blue whales coming up the Irish Sea. I think, you know, we sometimes have to give ourselves a pat on the back for, you know, what we did by stopping hunting the great whales in the 1980s. And, you know, I'm really hoping that those populations are going to recover. So I think, you know, we often beat ourselves up about the way we interact with nature in a negative way. And I think that the Save the Whale campaign of the 60s and 70s is something we really have to applaud ourselves for.
Well, thank you so much, Philip. I agree, and I think everyone here agrees as well. And keep doing all the wonderful and amazing work you're doing, and keep coming back to Provincetown.
Thank you. I can't wait.
All right. Thanks again, Philip.
Thanks. Cheers. Bye.
So we're nearing the end of our time with the whale ship Charles W. Morgan, but we want to quickly go back out to her, as we're very lucky to have the son of Jacques Cousteau aboard the ship, and we were just talking about his father's world of quiet in the ocean. But I just wanted to quickly back out to him and talk to him about his experiences with sound in the ocean. Matt, are you there?
Hi there, Kate. Yes, we're just getting ourselves all sorted out here. It's been a hectic afternoon here on board the Charles W. Morgan. We are nearly into our anchorage, and fortunately, I do have Jean-Michel Coustea standing by with me to offer some final thoughts here on acoustics.
Well, tell him I have the
us.
red cap,
Good to
Matt.
see you.
Hey, Matt.
Good to be here.
Hey, Matt.
Yes, Kate.
Tell him
Yes,
I
go
have
ahead.
the red cap on for him.
Kate says that she has the red cap on for you, so solidarity.
Well, I'm glad, and I happen to have with me, but I won't show it today, the one of my father's red cap.
That is pretty fantastic. I bet you don't get that out very often. That's a special item.
Very, very unusual, and my plan is, as I have the privilege of being on the ship to go to Boston, I will wear it that day.
That is going to be a special moment. Well, I'd wonder if you would offer some final thoughts here for us. The very famous documentary, The Silent World, it fascinated just a tremendous audience and really opened people's eyes to the ocean. It inspired a whole generation of future marine scientists. So how do you inspire young people today?
Well, see, in those days, my father's film, The Silent World, I happen to know because I was there. There was a feature film length, the only one. There was very, very little other productions. Television fundamentally did not exist. So today you have 300, 400, 500 television channels, so it's very, very difficult for people to pick and choose. So what we need to do is to have very attractive, strong moments. Like, for example, not only just being on this ship, but to remind ourselves that in the past, this used to go and kill whales. Today, this ship is here to preserve whales. Manage it as a resource. So that can be done in 5 minutes, 6 minutes. On the other hand, we know nothing about what's below the surface here. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of species that have yet to be discovered. So I'm now focusing on IMAX 3D, what I call secret ocean, which is to look at things we never pay attention to because they're tiny, and being able to present that to the public on a 100-foot screen, and for them to be blown away, just like I am, when I see the images that we can shoot now with this totally new technology.
That is almost as good as being there, and I think that's a tremendous way to take that message to the public.
So I'm looking forward to sharing all of that and new technologies being created. I call it the communication revolution. We can reach 7 billion people on the planet. We can pass on the message. There's no excuse anymore. So I'm very, very excited because we're living a completely different time, and education is very important. So we need to focus on young people, the future decision makers.
And that sounds like the future of the underwater world right there.
You got it. Absolutely. And, you know, I'm very excited because there are more and more people who are concerned about the ocean. You know, jokingly, I keep saying, it's too bad fish don't vote. I wish they could.
That would change quite a lot, but maybe for the better. Kate, back to you in the studio. This is Matthew Lawrence from the deck of the Charles W. Morgan.
Well, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Jean-Michel, so much for joining us on the show today, and for all your great reporting, Matt, from out on the water, and for all the wonderful guests who have joined us this weekend here on Oceans Live. We've reached the end of our time with the whale ship Charles W. Morgan, but she is continuing on her 38th voyage even after our broadcasts are over. You can follow the rest of her amazing journey on www.mysticseaport.org. So thank you so much to everyone who tuned in to our broadcasts over the past 3 days. We're so happy to be able to bring these images and interviews to you from here in Provincetown and out on the Charles W. Morgan, which truly is an incredible ship. I also want to extend our sincere thanks from everyone here on the Oceans Live team to Mystic Seaport for making this entire voyage a possibility, to the Pilgrim Monument and Provincetown Museum for being such wonderful hosts, and to all our terrific partners who have supported our broadcasts over the past 3 days. Before we sign off, I want to leave you with these amazing shots of whales that were all around the Charles W. Morgan yesterday. That, to me, shows how important this entire mission has been for the seaport. Once again, I've been your host, Kate Thompson, with NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, and we'll see you next time on Oceans Live.
Well, the times are hard and the wages low. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. I said times are hard and the wages low. And it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. With the voyage done and the winds don't blow, it's time for us to leave her. It was rotten meat and moldy bread. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Well, you'll eat or starve, the old man said, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. With the voyage done and the winds don't blow, it's time for us to leave her. And I thought I heard the old man say, leave her, Johnny, leave her. We can go ashore and collect our pay. And it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. When the voyage done and the winds don't blow, it's time for us to leave her. Yes, it's time for us to say goodbye. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the old pierhead is drawing nigh, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. With the voyage done and the winds don't blow, it's time